So yeah, I'll start. My name is Juan. We are starting a podcast that the official name, or the unofficial name, sort of official name right now is the Crypto Hippie Drum Circle. This may or may not change. Do not
I like
quote
it.
us yet. We could just keep it unofficial forever. That's also an option. Um, and Yeah, I mean, I'm doing crypto right now. I'm on my way to Belize. We're doing a project, sort of like an eco village, hemp slash kind of sustainable community sort of madness, ambitious project in Belize. And so we got the whole crew, um, Michael and Erica and a couple of others. I'm gonna be in Belize for like 2 weeks, so that's fun. And
Are
I just
you
started
in?
listening to 12 Rules for Life, so I'm loving it.
Sounds really awesome. Eco villages are really exciting stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, crypto housing communities, eco villages are definitely near and dear to my heart.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Earthships a couple years ago, where they teach you how to build sustainably off grid, produce all your own food, all your own water, electricity. And to me, that's a really important facet of anarchy, is this concept that, right now, most of us, we depend on the government systems that are in place for our very lives, for the food we eat, for the water we drink. And so to me, it's important to figure out how to free ourselves by getting off of that system and becoming more self-sufficient, and then creating our own governance structures via blockchain, right? In ways that are transparent and voluntary. So it's definitely something that I'm going to be getting involved with here pretty soon.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're
Yeah,
all,
that'd be awesome.
very too dependent on the government.
Yeah.
Although one of the things I like about living in Mexico is it's like definitely like government light. It just doesn't do as much stuff as the U.S. government.
Mm.
You kind of have to be a little bit more self-sufficient down here.
Yeah, it's very interesting to learn about just at the very least have knowledge about how to survive at that level if you ever need to. It's good to know, have a general sense of what to do. Um, but it's also fascinating to think about what it takes to actually create a community from scratch. Um, there, I mean, having been 3 years in Acapulco, trying to create a kind of anarchist community in this sort of big city. I mean, it's not that big of a city, but it's a pretty big city, and it's like, it's like it used to be the backyard of Hollywood, and now it's like kind of a forgotten garden. Like a lot of cheap luxury. It's lost its international appeal, and it's mostly nationals and expats like us that kind of we see that there's just cheap luxury down there. But it's also kind of chaotic in certain ways, and it's it's a bit rough around the edges, let's say, right? Anyway, there's plenty of things to talk about as far as like how creating a community, especially like the way that we want to do it is like starting from scratch and up. I mean, we can buy a property that already has some infrastructure built in, but there's a lot of questions that go into it. Least of which, how to potential conflicts that might rise between neighbors and stuff like at multiple levels. So anyway,
I'm Anthony. Let's see. I guess I've been an anarchist, my whole life. How did I become an anarchist? We'll go Jeff Berwick style. Yeah, I live in Houston. I met these guys at Anarcho. Love these guys. They're great people. I'm in the blockchain space right now. I'm working a company that does blockchain and oil and gas. But as I was saying earlier, my heart is near and dear to the intentional community, crypto housing. I really would love to build a network of houses that's kind of like Airbnb and blockchain combined, where you're part of a private network, but any of these houses that you go to are providing all of your own electricity and water, and then some of your food. I want to build places where there's workshops where we can redo a lot of the science. I have a hard time believing anything I've seen or read these days, whether it was school, history, science. I mean, you name it. In a lot of ways, I kind of want to start from the beginning and redevelop a lot of the things, redo like the double slit experiment in physics. That would be really cool just to do that on my own. So I want to workshop kind of a maker space and really just want to experiment and spend my life, I don't know, just tinkering and playing, kind of like Nikola Tesla said, that he never worked a day in his life, that he was always just playing. And so that's kind of how
That's awesome.
I'm hoping I can live the rest of my life with something like that.
Love it.
Okay, cool.
Go ahead.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm
Yeah,
sure.
I'll go next. My name's Arielle. I'm a media producer, writer, and philosopher, usually based in Toronto. Right now I'm in Montreal. I'm staying at an anarchist house for a few weeks, and I'm spending a lot of my time in the library, reading, trying to get like down to the basics, like understand what's going on in the world. I was an anarcho-communist for a lot of years, and I sort of became disillusioned with that. Now I'm studying to try to understand the relationship between like the state, anarchism, like free market capitalism, and human prosperity, and how they all mix in together, and just like where a lot of the ideas in the world right now, like where they came from originally.
So I'm curious.
Really,
Can I just like jump in and ask a question, like interview style?
yeah.
So I'm curious. So how did you get disillusioned with anarcho-communism? I don't hear a lot of people say that.
That's a really long story.
Well, that's all right.
Okay. No, it's okay, well, I guess one thing that I've been thinking about now, and it's not the reason I became disillusioned with it, but since I've been reading more about anarcho-capitalism, I'm starting to see that I suspect that conditions of anarcho-communism would just evolve into anarcho-capitalism pretty quickly.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So
It sounds right, but you know, it's really funny.
There's a few.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
That's okay. Go ahead, Juan.
Well, I was just gonna say that it's really interesting that you say that, because like I've been embedded in basically like as close to the hardcore anarcho-capitalist movement as I can see for like 3 years, and I'm starting to get disillusioned with the purity of that capitalism. If you took like the just, you know, purpose is to make money and just make money and everything can be resolved through money and business and stuff, I think there's deeper and more important layers to focus on, right? And but it's not necessarily anarcho-communism either, right? Like that dichotomy is false. And so anyway, I think we could, you know, that could lead to some interesting conversations, I'm sure.
It might be a good time for me to confess that I consider myself a libertarian socialist. Kind of a combination.
Really?
Yeah, socialism is totally cool as long as it's voluntary.
Right.
Yeah.
I really believe that there's a lot of great things to take from both anarcho-capitalism and anarcho-communism. And I think in a lot of ways these labels are just kind of like dividing lines that we arbitrarily set up for ourselves. When in reality, if I can have a conversation with someone that avoids a lot of these labels and a lot of these trigger words, I usually find out that we agree on like 90% of our philosophy.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
It's really hard to separate the government from corporation, in as
Yeah,
much as
it is.
corporation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and the property and the function of businesses and corporations is defended by government, and government is manipulated by corporations. So it's very hard. It's definitely like there's plenty of gray zone. There's plenty of gray zone in between. You know? And there's also like we can categorize ourselves in like different sort of political groups or anti-political groups. And then I think Anthony was saying is we can engage as individuals, and now things are a lot, you know, it's a much more different perspective. So yeah, that's fascinating. Chris, do you want to give us an introduction?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Chris Guida. I am a software engineer by trade. I quit my job a couple of years ago to pursue to just kind of become my own boss and become more independent and work on my health. I had some kind of concerning health issues at the time, and I've really kind of dug myself out of that hole, and I feel like I'm making some forward momentum right now in my life. I'm interested in, one of the big things that really affected my life, of course, is crypto, Bitcoin. That's actually one of the reasons why I've been able to have such a degree of independence in my life. And so basically it's personally helped me. And then also I think it's a really important revolution for the world. I think that our society as the internet's kind of started this process of decentralizing society from a hub and spoke model where we have all these centralized, points of power, which unfortunately, as we know, are also centralized points of failure. And so we're reorganizing society from that to a more peer-to-peer model. And so the internet started that process by democratizing information, kind of in the same way that the printing press democratized the Bible. So it used to be that the church had all the information. Now it was kind of the government and the media had all of the information, and that all of the information that went to the public kind of went through them, and they were the gatekeeper of information. So the internet kind of took that from them, and then now cryptocurrency is taking away their power to make money. And that's the next step in the decentralization of society. Now, people can be sovereign instead of just nations. Anyway, trying to kind of stop being such a nomad with my life. I've noticed that the longer I stay in a place, the easier life gets. And so every time I move, I'm like starting over, And so I've decided to kind of just kind of set down some roots here and see what happens. And I'm really excited about, as Anthony was talking about before, and Juan, kind of eco villages, making your own electricity, making your own food, getting your own water, doing all these things kind of independently without the government. And then recently, basically, I've been getting more active, just like watching YouTube news and stuff. And I've been getting really, really interested in, YouTube has gotten a lot better in the last year or two. It used to be that there was just kind of like entertaining stuff, but now there's like philosophy and like real good philosophy, especially like Jordan Peterson and like Brett Weinstein is really, or Weinstein, I can't remember which one it is. Like a lot of people that went on like Dave Rubin's show, the Rubin Report. Basically, these people have this. They have a philosophy which is, we just want to have a marketplace of ideas. We believe in classical liberalism, which is kind of the same idea as the non-aggression principle. It's kind of like the same values that voluntarists and anarchists have, which is, we want to solve our differences through an exchange of words, a discussion, and collaboration rather than fighting, violent conflict. And actually, another thing that I really am interested in is nonviolent communication, because the theory behind that is that all conflicts are resolvable without violent conflict. And I think basically if we can just convince everybody of that and sort of teach them the techniques, it's not something that you can just be good at right away. But I think we can have a nonviolent society. And I think we can, I think we're on the cusp of a kind of a new era of, where people are going to be a lot more free. So
Chris, I've got a question for you. You were talking about, earlier, you were talking about your health, and you took a couple years to try and sort of realign your health. Would you mind sharing a little bit, like, what is your health paradigm? Like, how do you see, what's your ideas on how to live a healthy life and get a healthy body?
So, so basically it's just an iterative process. My kind of first principle for health is that your body was designed to be healthy. And not only was it designed to be healthy, it was designed to know how to be healthy. Our bodies and our minds have evolved over a process of, basically billions of years, starting with bacteria. and then kind of the more complex forms, in the last tens and hundreds of millions of years. And there's this, your mind and your body are a lot more connected than the health industry would have you believe. Basically, if you have a clear mind, and I've figured this out through experimentation. If you have a clear mind and you're not addicted to anything, you can actually tell which activities are good for your body, and which activities are bad for your body. And some activities that are bad for your body are okay in moderation, but then when you do them a lot, your body will start to feel worse and worse until you stop doing that activity. And there are also some things there. So there's, things that you can introduce to your body which are negative for it, and then there are things that your body needs which are positive for it, where if you don't do them, you'll start to feel bad over time. And so basically the way that health is done in Western society is really centralized. It's basically, you put all of your trust into a doctor, and the doctor puts all of their trust into some scientists, and the scientists are funded by these drug companies. So it's like
science.
It's like, why should we, and you're actually your own best doctor. I mean, you're the one, when you go to the doctor says like, okay, what are your symptoms? And you have to tell them everything you know, because if you don't, they're probably going to misdiagnose you. So the thing is, you have all the information that you need to diagnose yourself if you just, had the knowledge that the doctors have. And all of that is really kind of on the internet, So yeah, I really do think that self-care is much more effective and, of course, much cheaper than relying on a doctor. And just, and most of the time,
you're saying one of the key central aspects of the way you're approaching health is self-awareness, to sort of self-reflect, listen to your body, listen to your mind.
Exactly. Mindfulness, like pay attention to how stuff makes you feel. If you do something and it makes you feel bad, or if you feel bad and you don't know why, just take a minute to think about all the stuff that you did that might explain why you feel bad. And usually it's pretty simple. Usually it's like,
I don't want to think about what I did last night.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting too, this idea you bring up of like moderation, like in like Western medicine, or like what ideas we have of health, there's often this idea that like if something is good and you just do a ton of it, and that's like really good, but it's like with stress, like really say stress is bad, so you should have no stress, but actually like a little bit of stress is good for you, and like
right.
activates your brain. And like with exercise, like we don't get enough exercise, so it's always like you gotta exercise more, but too much exercise like destroys your body. Like if you're like a coal miner or something, like you work like 14 hours a day, you destroy your body.
And here's the thing that you have to, but you also can't do moderation too much, okay? Because if you do moderation too much, you'll never figure out whether your activities are actually more extreme than you think. Like basically you have to occasionally experience those extreme moments in order to figure out where the boundaries are. And then you can kind of
it's true also.
One this way, and then one this way, and then a little bit less this way, and a little bit less this way, and eventually you find a balance.
Tell us a little bit, Chris, about a couple of extreme things you've done for your health in the recent past.
What's that?
Tell us a few extreme things you've done for your health in the recent past. Where you've strayed from the moderate path.
Yeah. So one of the things that basically everybody tells you is terrible for you is fasting. And
yeah, me too, man. I've done that. Sorry to jump in there. I just
it's all right.
did intermittent fasting in the last couple months, and it's been pretty cool. I don't have hard and fast rules about it, but I just kind of wake up and I'm like, fuck it, I won't eat until like maybe dinner time or something.
Yeah, well, and you can actually take it a lot longer. So I had so I did a 3-week fast where I didn't eat any food for, and I have beet all over my hand.
Holy crap.
So, but so that's not what happened. It's just a beet. So what I did was I went without food for 3 weeks. I only drank water. I had some electrolyte capsules because there were some, like when you don't eat for like 5 days, like the second, third, fourth, fifth days are all like kind of rough. And then after that, it's kind of, but during that time that it's rough, like I just had these electrolyte capsules that, people on Reddit were just like, you'll totally be fine if you do a 21-day fast. There's actually no recorded deaths of anybody dying after 21 days. Basically, there was a woman who died from a 40-day fast. and she had very low fat, on her body, and she had some other health problems. And so there was basically if you're pretty healthy, you can do a 21-day fast. There's basically zero chance that will happen. So basically the upshot is I had this problem with my ear where I couldn't hear treble frequencies above 5,000 hertz. And you're supposed to be able to hear up to 20 kilohertz. And so I suddenly lost my hearing in 2012. Fast forward to 2016, there was no improvement. I had tried a lot of things. And this was kind of a motivation for me to kind of change how I approach my health, because I love music, and I just didn't feel happy, with how music didn't sound good to me anymore. So I basically just tried all these things. And so this fast that I did is the only thing that actually ended up helping. When I broke my fast at the end, I started testing my hearing using Audacity, and I noticed that my hearing level went up from 5 kilohertz to 14. So it's still not perfect, but it's in my opinion miraculous. Basically the doctors were just we don't know what's wrong with you, we'll inject your ear with steroids. And I was that doesn't seem helpful at all. Oh, and why are you charging me $2,000 when you didn't help me at all?
That's really interesting. They've shown in studies that fasting causes adult neurogenesis.
Yeah.
So
that is definitely true.
Yeah, they used to think that neurons only grew when you were a kid, and then when you're an adult, they just die and then you die. But now now they know that all adults experience neurogenesis, but there's things you can do to make it speed up. Yeah. And fasting is one of those things.
That is definitely true.
Yeah.
That's fascinating. Our friend Sasha basically I think he kind of popularized it in Acapulco recently, because Sasha Dagem, he's this sort of internet famous. He started through the pickup artist game and stuff, and now he's gone full spiritual hippie mode, and some of the stuff he talks about, just I'm whoa, bro, you're way too far out for me. But
yeah.
But then he came to Acapulco, and he had lost probably 30% of his weight. He used to be a little bit sort of meatier. And he was just kind of those people when they lose a lot of weight fast, their skin is kind of hanging a little bit, but they look thin and slim.
Yeah.
That's what he looked like. It looked good. And he's yeah, I haven't eaten anything in 20 something days. I was just in Ecuador, did this workshop where they kind of walked me through how to not eat it. Yeah, I really believe that you can go on without eating for a long time. And I know he was I don't believe that I will need to eat food again.
No, it's
Which about 10 days later he was yeah, I'm eating food again, but not that much.
And if you never work out, you really don't need that much energy. Your body can sustain itself using you don't actually burn 2,000 calories a day unless you eat a whole bunch of carbs, and then basically that just raises your body temperature and burns it off as heat. The system of health, of nutrition that was designed in this country was designed for the industrial age. It was designed to make sure that workers were always able to work, a long, strenuous work day, and and basically minimize, the amount that they were sick, and the amount that they were weak and unfocused. And if you don't eat for 21 days, you're not let's not make it sound like it's everything this magical thing where it'll just make your life better. You won't be able to do that much. You'll be able to think and process information, but you won't be able to exercise.
Yeah.
You'll be able to do physical labor. You do need to.
A lot of things seem to be in the West oriented towards the Industrial Revolution, right? We can look at education, or the medical system, which you just pointed out, which is interesting, and there's probably a lot more things like that. So that's very interesting. But go ahead.
Yeah,
Arielle.
But yeah, I mean, basically that thing where they're you make sure your blood sugar doesn't get too low is bullshit. Your body can regulate its own blood sugar, and you won't die. Now you
okay. But the thing about fasting is, I suspect, or from what I've studied about it, it seems like it's really good for your health, but it can ruin your looks, because it can cause your hair, especially if you're a guy, it can cause hair loss, and if you're especially a woman, it can cause your metabolism to slow down over the long term, so you can gain weight years down the road more easily.
Well,
can you
there's
elaborate
an advantage to it. Like to which one, the hair or the weight gain?
Just in general, when you say like fasting can potentially have some negative effects, do you mean like doing week-long fast repeatedly, intermittent fasting? Like what kind of fasting are you talking about?
They don't really know, but it seems to be the case that if you fast, like especially like when they look at people who fast for, sorry, one sec.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder if we can look at those research studies to sort of see what.
Basically, like one study they did is they looked at the people who were in The Biggest Loser, like the TV show where they like boot camp people and then like.
That is not good fasting. By the way,
it's not,
yeah.
But there is evidence that when you
do it wrong, you will get fucked up. You have to do it right. Disclaimer.
What was that, Arielle?
There's a lot of evidence that calorie reduction does permanently reduce your metabolism. So you can't go back to eating normally. If you go back to eating how you were eating before, you'll become heavier.
Oh yeah, don't go back to how you were eating before. Yeah, definitely don't do that. But the thing about fasting is that it unaddicts you from all of the stuff that you were addicted to. So I got myself off grains, and like the first week of doing that was rough. But then after that, I didn't need it anymore, and I didn't have the craving. And now when I go and eat grains, I feel better. So
this is where earlier, Chris, you talked about moderation. We were talking about doing something, like a little bit of something is good, but doing a lot of it you might not really get a whole lot of benefits. In fact, it can hurt you. I would guess fasting is probably one of these things where like do a little bit of fasting, maybe cycle through periods of feast and famine, because humans also in our evolution, we did often, in addition to fasting as well.
Okay, one
thing I noticed I was telling you guys I did a little bit of intermittent fasting recently. One thing I noticed, remember when you were a kid and you could eat like a whole pizza and it didn't matter, you could eat anything you want and you wouldn't gain weight?
Yeah.
And as you get older, you're like, well, shit, man, I just ate one slice of pizza and I got fatter, tomorrow. What I noticed is for the past couple of months, doing some of this intermittent fasting, and like I said, I'm not hard and fast about it. I'm not like I can't eat today. Some days I'll eat a bunch of food, but most days I'll wait until like lunch or dinner to eat. But what I noticed is that I can go like down a whole pizza. Like, dude, I can go get a whole large pizza and eat it and not put on hardly any fat the next day for it, because it reset my metabolism in a way that my body's like, oh shit, I have calories, I can use them for stuff now. So I've found that I think I reset my metabolism in a good way, but I think I like what Arielle was saying, that if you do this for too long, too much, you might find in fact that your metabolism gets lowered and now you can't go enjoy some of the food that you love. I've been experimenting with diet maybe for about 10 years now, and one conclusion that I've come to is that, yeah, we should eat good, right? We should avoid grains, probably. We should avoid all the junk that's out there. But at the same time, I've also come to the conclusion that, life is worth living. Like, life is for fun. So why the hell am I not going to go eat a pizza every now and then on my birthday, which was like last week, by the way.
Happy birthday.
Right, and
35,
so
I'm an old fuck now.
So one of the things that fasting did to me is you're definitely right. Like, it definitely makes you more sensitive to everything. But I prefer that, because when you go through life and you're just in this kind of haze, you're eating and doing all these things that are actually bad for you, and they're actually accumulating damage in your body.
Yeah.
And one day you're 50 and you have a heart attack and you're like, what happened? I felt fine, But if you go through life and you're sensitive to the stuff that's bad, then you'll do less of it. Definitely. Like, I don't eat pizza anymore. Like, I can't. But I don't want to, because it makes me feel terrible, and that's probably I'm taking that as a sign that my body, knows that that's bad for me, and then if I do it,
yeah, this is a really interesting topic around food too. I just wanted to kind of mention, without trying not to sound pretentious, but I've been starting to really appreciate new foods and like kind of like whenever I have a chance to try something new, because there's such a wide range of food.
oh yeah,
and there's some really good stuff. Like I've been in the
Like,
States.
you know how many vegetables there are?
There's a lot of vegetables. There's a lot of fruits, and there's a lot of different kind. Like seafood is, huge spectrum. Like red meat is a lot more, but there's also many different parts of the cow that you can eat too. Like I don't know if you guys have ever eaten cow tongue. It's probably my favorite food, my favorite red meat. But anyway, yeah. So I was having a hard time the other day, for example, thinking of like what American food, what good food America has other than like burgers and pizza and hot dogs. And this could be like a total stereotype, but I really look forward to coming back with some interesting food stories from there.
Yeah.
You know, Chris, you were talking about, you were saying, hey, I never eat pizza because it makes me feel bad. When I first kind of started this journey about 10 years ago, I just went cold turkey, and I did what I consider to be a fairly healthy change, right? And I changed a lot of things at once, sort of a shotgun approach. For the first year or so that I did this, I found that I couldn't eat pizza, I couldn't eat bread, or gluten, grains, right? There were certain foods that I used to eat, but I just could not eat them anymore without getting some kind of negative reaction. What was cool is that as the years progressed, and it wasn't a diet, it was a lifestyle change. But what I noticed was that after a certain period of time, I realized that I could actually tolerate some of these foods, which for a period of maybe 2 years, I really couldn't tolerate that well. My guess is that I was healing from really years, a lifetime of sort of a toxic load. And so every time I reintroduced the source of those toxins, my body immediately was like, hey, that's bad. Like, don't eat that. But after my body finally healed over a few years, I found that, hey, I can actually enjoy some of this food on a limited basis. Although I kind of overdid it around my birthday. I ate pizza the day before my birthday, on my birthday, and the day after, and I was eating all this like really bad quality milk products. And you can probably hear I've got kind of a sinus thing going on now, because that's always my reaction to crappy milk products. Yeah. As long as I'm drinking like grass-fed milk, eating high-quality milk products, all of it grass-fed, not grain-fed, no hormones, all that, good stuff, I'm fine. But as soon as I start eating crap milk products, sinuses, and it's not just the cocaine, which I hypothetically may or may not have done.
So I definitely agree with you that you don't have to eat like perfectly, like a monk, all your life. Definitely, if you do it most of the time, your organs will function properly enough to effectively filter out the toxins that you're eating. Your liver will just work better. Your liver's job is to filter out toxins. And so
Thanks, liver.
if you're not overloading your body with toxins, then the toxins that you do eat will be less harmful. So,
cool.
I mean, I think like a big thing too with diet is like it's all a trade-off, right? It's like what you want to do with your life. Like if you want to be a monk, it makes sense to eat like a monk. If you want to achieve like higher levels of spiritual awareness, then like certain diets are better for that, like more vegan-y diets. But if you want to like and like you're saying, like with a lot, like if you eat a lot of carbs, if you eat a lot of calories, you can do a lot in a day, but then you're wearing out your body really quickly, so you're going to die sooner. So it's a lot of trade-offs. Like if you fast, then it's really good for your brain and for your body, but your body might be like, oh, it's fasting conditions, we're going to lose the hair because that's a luxury. So it's trade-offs. Like there's no perfect diet.
What's interesting is we could even get in, maybe go Jordan Peterson style a little bit and talk about how fasting has been a tradition through all of the religions throughout our recorded history. Jesus did a bunch of fasts, right?
It's probably a good idea.
Monks, right? So there's something there, right? There's got to be something there where it's been reported that fasting is good for us, and it does something for us that's important.
Yeah, one of the things, one of the ways that it was sold to me is that when you eat and your metabolism is working on processing the food, your body's actually spending a lot of energy focusing on that. And when you stop eating, your body now has free energy to actually start repairing yourself, which is, it's a very conceptual way of explaining it, but it definitely made sense to me. And I felt like I'm not somebody that's like, I don't consider myself to be particularly well educated in nutrition or in exercise, even though I'm starting to, like this year, one of my focuses is to start paying a lot more attention to that. and I'm doing it, and I'm sort of getting fitter and eating better and all that. But so that made sense to me. And I fasted as well recently, and I felt unbelievably good. I could not believe how good I felt after having like not eaten anything for a day and a half. And I think I'm definitely going to keep doing it on a regular basis. But this is really great to hear the nuances of it, because like anything, you know, I think the quote, I don't know who said this, but I saw this quote on the internet recently. Everything in moderation, including moderation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I like it.
I think that could be the title of this podcast, maybe.
And
I was
it's,
thinking,
I completely agree.
okay.
and it's I mean, we could segue, like, this is like it applies to like a lot of these issues we're talking about with like morality and politics too. Like, it's possible that like these different political systems we were talking about, that they're like useful tools in different situations, that they make sense in moderation, but that none is like the ideal system.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's a great point.
Democracy in moderation.
And actually, I can connect the dots a little bit more there, I think. I would say that one of the things that humanity is sort of going toward, like the trajectory of humanity, is we're becoming larger and more organized collective consciousnesses. We're kind of like companies and societies and, you know, clubs and countries are forms of collective consciousness or a collective you know, organism. And basically the government of a, or at least the protocols that run a society are kind of like the ego in your brain. You know, like your brain is a bunch of cells, you know, and they're all just, it's mostly a decentralized system, mostly just, you know, cells firing, you know, and you know, mostly just kind of this, you know, agarist, you know, type thing that's going on in your brain. But you've got this ego, which is a narrative, right? It's a story of what you're doing and why you're doing it, and, you know, things that you'd like to achieve. And so the government is kind of that, but for society instead of for your brain. And basically,
that's fascinating. Well,
yeah.
the government wouldn't be the story. The story would be nationalism and the religion. It would be that would be the because the government is simply a means by which to reach consensus upon the rules, but the rules are defined by the culture and what individuals are willing to fight for. You know, really hard to get other people to play with.
The
Right,
government is kind of like this thing that's like, oh, well, we have too much X, and so we're going to do Y.
But the government is people. Like, the government is made of people. This is something that I get frustrated with libertarians and anarchists all the time. It's like the free market is individuals making choices, and the government is individuals making choices. Everything is individuals making choices. But obviously, there's a lot of the choices that individuals make, they rhyme with each other, and they're made in order to rhyme with each other. And so it's like it's sort of like a symphony of co-creation of society or something like that. But the narrative is it's who are we, what do we stand for, what do we care about, what are we willing to die for, basically. And
Right.
you make it hard line enough, you know?
Yeah.
That's
What
a
are
really
our
good point,
values?
Juan. I think that's lost on people a lot of times, that in a manner of thinking, there is no government. The government doesn't exist. It's just people doing things, right? There's no free market. It's just individuals.
And if you look at it, yeah, if you look at it from economics perspective, there is kind of like there is such a thing as an imbalance of incentives, where you have a small group of people that have sort of let's say specialized knowledge and specialized sort of relationship access to a particular network, right, or a network effect. Like the people that work inside Facebook and know how it works and are already proven that they know how to work it. And there's people that are stuck with the effects of leveraging, like writing this network effect, which is everybody else. We're just on Facebook because everybody's on Facebook. And so you kind of have to be on Facebook in order to talk to people, because now you talk to them on Facebook. And the difficulty of leaving and changing, like it takes a lot of collective effort to break that network effect, whereas it's very easy for the people in the niche kind of influence to change rules and modify people's behavior at scale. And that's like an economics question of the costs of, like, the economics of power. So yeah, so that's the one exception to whatever we were talking about. That took way too much brain power for me to keep the context. But
Do y'all feel like the government might be? So I had a friend actually. He wasn't particularly spiritual, and he definitely wasn't a libertarian. But years ago, he was like, "Man, I kind of feel like the government is this entity. Like it's a thing." So it, directly contradictory to what we were just saying. Sure, the government, it's just individuals, but in another sense, it's like has a life of its own, almost like it's its own, in a spiritual sense, it's almost its own entity. It has its own consciousness that's composed of the collective, which is the individuals, and together there's like this conscious entity that we call government.
Consciousness.
Yeah.
From that comes out of the individual. Just like your brain is a consciousness, it's a single consciousness, but it's actually just a decentralized network of
cells. Yeah. Yeah, that's fascinating. Chris and I were talking about this a while back, and we went. It's fascinating that he sees it as like that as well.
But yeah, so
I don't know. Like the government has a bit of a different relationship in time than relationship with time than individuals do. Because like the government, it accumulates these laws that are like very old. A lot of them. It's based on a system that's very old, like liberal democracy. It's hundreds of years old, and the momentum of where the government's moving is based on decisions that were made many governments ago when there was a different public that chose that government. So in a way, it's like it's not immediately responsive to like the will of the people. Like it's got like a bit of a time lapse thing going on.
There's a lag.
Yeah,
it is I like that.
It is the carcass of our ancestors.
Well, and I think you can draw a parallel again between that and your brain. Your brain has emotions, right? And emotions are kind of like on a bigger scale. They're kind of like, let's elect Trump. Let's elect Clinton or whatever. It's just like this strange like urge that doesn't have a great logical explanation. It's kind of just like this emotion, right? And there is a motivation for it. The motivation is that collectively, a lot of the individuals in the society are kind of feeling an urge, towards a particular direction. They're just feeling an impetus in a particular direction. They're just feeling like we need to do this.
And I just want to add that
that logical thought.
Go ahead, man.
Because, let's think about this. Is this emotion something that we should listen to, or is it kind of irrational?
Well, and I want to add that, like, just because you make a decision emotionally or intuitively and without having a particular capacity to articulate that, the reasoning or the logic of that, through logic, like just because you're acting emotionally and intuitively doesn't mean that there isn't good reason or logic to your instinct or your intuition. Mm-hmm. But it's definitely better if you're consciously aware of the path that you're taking rather than acting based on kind of old structures, right? Because you could argue very much that emotions and intuition and instinct are the carcass of our ancestors. They are the castles that are, millennia of life and survival of the fittest and whatever else you want to add to that equation, co-created, and we're like peak, right? So yeah, that's fascinating.
It feels like our intuitions and our emotions, they tend to guide our actions in the immediate term, right, in the present moment. But we also have this capacity for self-reflection and intellectual discourse and examination. So what I found over the years is that through these intellectual pursuits, I can actually modify my emotions. I can say, wait a second, I felt that emotion in that moment, but I see now how that emotion wasn't useful and maybe it wasn't even correct. I hadn't even analyzed the situation correctly. And so I found that I can use my intellect to modify my emotional state and my intuitive state, just to, in turn, my intuitions inform my intellect about what to examine.
Right.
Absolutely, dude.
Yeah.
And you can even change very stern behavior. Like bad habits, you can change them through journaling if you can sort of argument yourself into the new position. I've been testing it personally. I can tell you guys about it later. Go ahead.
Are you doing the Jordan Peterson self-authoring?
Sort of, yeah, sort of something like that. Go ahead, Ariel.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I think it can often move the other way too, or it often does move the other way. Like, if you hold an intellectual position and you like feel some emotion, like you feel unsettled about your beliefs, or you feel very interested in a particular topic in some way, like those emotions can guide like your intellectual searching. And often I think like emotional processing is kind of faster than intellectual processing. So with intellectual processing, you have to go through every stage.
Yep.
Whereas with emotional processing, you're using like heuristics, like shortcuts. So your emotions might be able to tell you like something's not quite right here, when intellectually you can't figure out what it is yet. And I think like on a societal level, it's like Hegel saw it as like these kind of like shifts in society. He saw it as like the movement of the spirit through history. So you get like these like large groups of people, like millions of people who all kind of seem to have the same intuition or the same emotion at a particular time, and that starts like guiding society in a certain way, and no one really understands what it is yet.
That's cool. So that sounds very broad in the terms of like looking at humanity as a singular consciousness. That when humanity has an idea, it appears in many people at the same time. Is that the kind of ideas you're discussing there?
Yeah, that's definitely a big element of it.
Yeah.
So if we
That's
compare,
interesting.
so I definitely want to.
I don't know that I buy this whole like we are one consciousness thing completely, but there's some truth to it. Yeah.
So I think
that's not necessarily part.
It's not necessarily what?
Go ahead. That's not really what Hegel was saying. He just like saw it as like he just saw it like a society was moving upwards towards like an ideal over time. Like he was a progressivist, and so like the individual minds bring in new ideas that become like instantiated on the societal level through like a process of dialectic.
If we want to connect, like look at the U.S. basically as a sort of consciousness. It's almost like we have two different neural networks which can be a ruling network at any given time, depending on who the public decides to elect. So we've got the Republicans and we've got the Democrats, and so in times of worry,
I enjoy these.
That's this too. Basically, it's almost like having multiple personalities. I mean, basically, the U.S. has two personalities. Okay, and depending on the circumstances, the neural network will select which personality it wants to be the ruling personality. And the other personality just has to sit back and watch. And then, 4 years later, there's another selection. Your brain, I think, does a kind of similar thing, except it doesn't take 4 years. It's just instant. Like, it just takes in new information, and eventually, there's a tipping point is reached where it's like, I need to switch myself into a different mode, sort of a fight or flight mode. It's kind of almost what the Republicans are. They're kind of just like, we're scared. We don't know what's going on. We gotta, let's lock down our border and just figure out what's going on. It's kind of like when you're feeling stressed out, you want to just go in a corner and meditate, and you don't want to deal with the outside world. So you want to kind of just make this nice little wall around yourself where nobody can get in. And like, I actually, I watched some videos from Richard Spencer, because I wanted to see, what they're saying, and see if people will listen to it. I don't think we have anything to worry from, but basically, the idea is, let's put a 50-year moratorium on immigration. Let's just have neutral immigration. Like, basically, in order to let somebody in, we have to wait for somebody to leave. And that's kind of like when your brain is just like, okay, I just want to meditate. I just want to like go in a corner and just be like, breathe in.
Speaking of politics, what did you guys think about the theater of Zuckerberg in front of Congress? What were y'all's thoughts on that?
I didn't watch it, but I'm curious to hear what people think, and I've been kind of paying attention to like clips and stuff. He's been memed that like there's a lot of memes coming out of through that. He's being reborn as a meme. It's pretty funny, and all kinds of cyborg sort of data. Like it's pretty funny.
Yeah, I put that on Facebook where somebody made him look like Commander Data from Star Trek.
Mm-hmm. You guys watch
That's a
PewDiePie?
good comparison.
I haven't seen him.
I love PewDiePie. Like this is basically one of the only things that I watch on YouTube aside from a couple like JP and Jordan Peterson, like some AI videos. Like I watch very little YouTube. Black Pigeon Speaks is pretty good too. And anyway, he has this video where he reviews the Mark Zuckerberg meme that came out of this situation. And apparently, before this event, there was a meme that was becoming popular called the FBI meme, where you're talking to somebody online, and then it's like, "Hi FBI," and then you start talking to your friend, right? Or like you're on Facebook, and they're like, "Just ignore this FBI," or like just basically you're talking to the NSA because you know they're listening, right? But it's just in the loose, people are just using the FBI. Well, it seems like Zuckerberg has now inhabited the FBI meme, and it's just thanks, Zuck, or like you're tweeting to somebody, and Zuck is like, yeah, that's a great idea, He just includes himself in the conversation.
Oh, I love it. I love the internet.
It's funny as fuck.
Cock Zucker.
So you gotta think like, what if he really is just an android?
You know, I had that, like when he was talking to senators, they would ask him a question, and then he'd go, "Senator, blah 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 blah," and it was like, "Oh my God, you're Lieutenant Commander Data. Like you're an engineer. You actually are."
It's so weird.
The commander. That does not process.
Yeah. That is actually not the protocol that we follow. Like everything he says is completely like logical and unemotional. Really flat concept.
Yeah.
I thought my personal take on it was designed to make Congress look stupid, which is you don't even have to try. They just are like they're good at that. And they wanted to make Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook look like the good guy, so that everyone keeps on giving up their data and giving up everything to Facebook and be like, oh no, Facebook's great, and they are great, kind of, if they weren't, all of the CIA or whatever.
Yeah, they're great in a very Darwinian kind of way.
Yeah.
It's I mean the government gets all kinds of information. The government can get our data from Facebook pretty easily. Like it's not really in their interest to shut it down.
Yeah.
Well, not only that, but like they benefit from it dramatically because the government could never get us to give them that kind of information voluntarily.
I mean, the thing is, you can use cryptography and just hide from the government. The issue with that is that it's very inconvenient and kind of difficult. I know. Like you guys are all into crypto. You go to crypto meetups and you'll meet these people who they're just like, well, I don't have a Facebook. Well, I don't have a, I don't use apps. And it's like, what?
How do you life, bro?
What are you afraid of?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I have a confession, guys. I just ordered the Google Pixel 2.
I have one.
How do you use it?
I just got it 2 days ago in San Francisco because I lost my phone.
Dude, I didn't lose my phone, but seriously, 2 days ago I got my Google Pixel. I'm not on it right now. I'm still on my old phone because I've been busy, but so it's good though, huh?
Yeah, it's great. It was hella expensive, but the cool thing about it is, I lost my phone in San Francisco, and I was leaving on a flight the next day, and so I needed a new phone that had Google Fi because Google Fi is my my provider, and they work like all over the world. Okay, and so basically, I was going to either need to find my phone, and I left it in the cab, and I was blacked out, and I don't remember what happened. And so I was like, that's probably not going to work. So I need to buy a phone, and not only that, but I need to get a special Google Fi SIM card mailed to me in Mexico. And so I talked to this customer service, and they were like, well, we don't ship to Mexico. And I was like, fuck, what am I going to do? So I was like, is there anything I can do? And he was like, yeah, you can buy a Pixel 2. It's the only phone that has this new type of SIM card called an eSIM card. And you just literally buy the phone, download the Project Fi app, and log in, and you can port your number to the phone. And I was like, sweet. Yeah. And it works.
Finally, right?
Yeah. Like Google is
the concept of a SIM card seems so outdated and arcane. Like, what is it, 2006?
Yeah, and I didn't have to, I did it myself. I didn't even have to have the representative at the store let me type in, your social security number. It's like, no, I don't want to give
I was in Austin about a month ago for not South by Southwest, but the crypto event before South by Southwest. So we went to this art exhibition one afternoon, and we're kind of out on a nice grassy area under a tree. It's beautiful. And so this girl starts walking around. She's like, "Hey, we're going to meditate." And we're all going to sit in a circle and meditate soon, and, guided meditation. I said, "Oh, that's cool. And I'll be right here." And so after everyone got in the circle, right before we started, it's like, "Hey guys, I have some special crystals. Can I put them in the center of the group here? Can y'all help me charge these crystals?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course, brother." And so I pulled out my cell phone. I was like, "This has quartz and I think glass and I don't know, but I'm low on charge. Can you guys charge my phone for me?" Luckily, they were all like of good humor. They laughed and it was good. And then I quit being a dick and we actually meditated.
Nice. Yeah, all of the crazy like woo stuff that hippies are into is kind of like.
Wait, you're a hippie. You're part of the crypto hippie.
Exactly. That was going to be my point. It's like I kind of like it because it's it's like how, I don't know if you guys have listened to how Jordan Peterson talks about religion, but it's all psychology, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And it's if you look at it that way, it doesn't matter really whether what you're believing is there is actually there. What matters is that you believe it's there.
No. It's not just psychology. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm a very condescending interruption. It's psychology, but it's also philosophy and it's also physics, and then it's like also metaphysics. So it's like a combination of philosophy, psychology, and narrative. Yeah. So it's not just relativistic meaning, sort of because we share the meaning. There is some. Yeah.
I'm not saying that there's no truth to it or no objective truth to it, whatever that means. But what I'm saying is that it is undeniable that there is something psychological going on, and that it by itself is a good enough motivation to believe in it.
I mean, I think a big difference between some of the New Age stuff and like some of these ancient religions like Christianity is like what Jordan Peterson would argue is like these older religions, like they've been vetted by time. So they've like they've been around for they've survived for so long, and that in itself is kind of like recommends them in a way because they've proved themselves to be useful and applicable in all these different situations, and they've like picked up all this like wisdom and knowledge through like traveling through time. Whereas like some of this new stuff that's only a few years old, it could be the next best thing, like it could be way better than anything that's ever been before, but it hasn't been vetted in the same way, and it's not necessarily as rich. Well, I mean, they're not as rich as like these older traditions.
And have you guys ever read the book Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb, where he talks about things that have been around for longer are more likely to be around for a lot longer more?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I don't know if you guys have read that book.
I haven't read it.
It sounds. It reminds me of past performance as a good indicator of future expectation, something like that.
Oh, interesting.
Not exactly.
I listened to the audiobook. I don't remember that specific detail, but that sort of makes sense. Yeah.
And so the idea is that you can create things that are anti-fragile, systems, organizations that basically become hardened over time because they iterate. Things are tried, mistakes are made, errors are fixed, and then version 2.0 comes out, and it's better than version 1.0. And then 2000, fast forward 2,000 years, you've got version whatever. Maybe it's not the most flexible thing, but it definitely has some kind of wisdom contained in it, which can help you inform your action. Maybe it's not a perfect roadmap. Maybe it's not a perfect instruction book, which is going to tell you exactly what to do in every situation. But it's going to say like, well, here's all the stuff here's the combined knowledge of past generation.
That's a difficult balance to walk in a lot of ways, because if society was just like it was 100 years ago, we could take all of that accumulated wisdom and really bank on it, right? We like that's exactly how we should act, right? We respect our elders, all of these things. But in the kind of age that we're in now, where all of these changes are happening so quickly. These technological changes, right? The way that we live our lives, the earth is changing, society.
Hey, Arielle,
It's like
can you mute your microphone? Okay.
Sorry, I was on mute, right?
No, you forgot to mute, but just
Sorry about that.
No, don't worry about it. We were talking about the concept of this ancient wisdom that has been passed down over many generations, and we have it in text, we have it in story form, and the concept now is, how do we grab the good parts of that, the stuff that's timeless, right? The stuff that defines us as just as people, as humanity, and then how do we discard the traditions that might not be serving us any longer, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of things wrapped up in religion and rules. I like to call them the scribbles, the Bible, or the Constitution. I just call them the scribbles.
Constitution is fucking shit, sorta. I like the fourth. It's got some really good ideas. It didn't hold because, well, the Industrial Revolution, I think, is a good example of. We just touched on that example earlier, that we're moving out of the Industrial Revolution. We're ready into the information age, and the institutions that made the United States the most powerful, sort of successful government in society, probably in history. Maybe, I don't know if you could compare with the Greeks, definitely as far as accumulated wealth and technology and stuff, is also making it kind of creep. You know, like the boat is under pressure, right? Like there's like boats shooting left and right. And it's in part because it's that old industrial, like it's not fit for purpose anymore. And as far as like in many ways, this the updating of the carcass, right? That's what this is, like Jordan Peterson talks about this. Like it's the one of the things that the youth brings to society is reevaluating all the things, but it has to be balanced with the old wisdom. And then that's the difference between the. Anyway, I don't want to get too metaphysical there, but the wise king and the dictator, et cetera, et cetera. Go ahead.
One of the old things that survives is war, conquest in the military. Like people be like, oh, well, America is so great and wealthy because all of our democratic institutions. It's like, okay, partially, but the other part of that is military conquest. America was founded on military conquest and has continued to be prosperous on that level. We could talk about right and wrong and how it doesn't exist, but it also exists at the same time. Right, we could go a lot of directions with that, but I guess I just wanted to make that little point that that a lot of our wealth has been based on war.
That is true.
Yeah, but it's not just war, right? I mean, it was the free speech, it was the gun rights, because the gun rights put a check on the government, except that the government has completely escaped that check.
Well,
I mean, not completely. It hasn't completely escaped it because there is a lot of sort of, I guess, the most well-armed civilian population in the world. I mean, maybe only comparative to like to Switzerland, right? As far as and then the whole free speech is obviously being tested right now, and Facebook and Google are trying to escape it and all that. But yeah, there's definitely this kind of like the police of the world problem.
Hey man, we should disarm the government. I'm all for disarmament. Let's start with government.
So I wanted to touch on something that Anthony talked about with basically we have some systems which are working for us, and we have other systems which are old, and actually all you guys were talking about this, but there's some systems that are old that processes that we do that aren't serving us anymore.
Kidding.
And this is something I've been thinking about a lot. It's applicable to individual psychology as well, the same as all these other things that I've been talking about, where you pick up these habits as a kid. Maybe your parents yelled at you, or you had a bad experience doing something, and you learned this behavior which helped you out when you were a kid. And then when you became an adult, that it stuck with you, and it started causing problems for you down the road. And I think that the U.S. is very much like that, and a sort of society, large collective consciousnesses have the same thing. They have these traditions, some of which basically define us. You don't want to get rid of all of the traditions, because then you lose your identity, right? You just become something else, and I don't know, like that seems, I don't know, not desirable.
Maybe fragile, right? like you might become fragile because you are no longer standing
Right.
on the strength that got you where you are, right?
Right.
And this is one of the things that I've debated with anarchists and libertarians lately too, is that it seems like there's this man, it's just, this is part of my disillusionment with the popular libertarianism, I'd say, is that people claim, like, seem to think that the goal of life is freedom for freedom's sake, and then they get freedom and they just kind of devolve into hedonism, and it's just like, let's fuck everybody and let's do drugs, all kinds of drugs except heroin, and then go do
And they never accept any responsibility.
Yeah,
and that's
no responsibility for society. It's just escape society, go live in the jungle, or the most tolerable sort of the closest thing to it that's tolerable, and it's like, yeah, okay, I get the value of that in the short term. I mean, I've done it to some degree, even though I'm in the Bitcoin space, so I'm engaging society at that level. But it gets boring, and
it's not fulfilling.
It's not fulfilling.
Ultimately fulfilling. And that's, again, this is what, going back to Jordan Peterson, like he talks about, if you want to start, having a meaningful existence, all you have to do is shoulder some responsibility. And this is something I've been like thinking about recently, like just kind of slowly just taking on more and more responsibility in society. And it makes sense to me that would be the most fulfilling thing. And of course it's the best thing for you and the best thing for society, because society, needs responsible adults to run it, to be kind of the rock.
Yeah, and what the rock is the rocks that defend freedom. So if the goal is to freedom for freedom's sake, then it seems to me logical that the goal is that you must prioritize defending whatever lets you keep that freedom. And that means, to some degree, engaging in society. And so if you just get out of the way, then society will just go wherever it would go if you're not there, and that's probably not a good place if you're freedom oriented. So yeah, you gotta fight for freedom, in a sense, whatever that means. Doesn't mean we have to go to war or anything like that necessarily, but maybe it does, right?
I find it interesting that there's such a diversity of experience here on the earth. You can kind of experience anything you want. You could say that I have a belief in continuation of our consciousness, both before and after the life that we experience here in these bodies. But you can be born into a hunter-gatherer tribe. They still exist here on Earth, right? You can be born into an elite, top-level, lizard people or something like that. You can be born into wealth. You can be born into poverty. You can be born an athlete. Like this experience here is so just rich in diversity that if you want to fight for freedom, you can fight for freedom. If you want to be a Bitcoin crypto nomad, you can do that. What's really cool about the moment in time that we're at now, you can do anything you want. And
you can do both.
In a way, when you realize that, you're like, well, shit, what do I want? What do I actually want to do? I'm not doing. I can go fight for freedom, and it needs to be fought for. Or do I just want to go hang out in the jungle? I guess maybe all of the above. A little sample buffet of all the things of life.
Yeah, and it can also be inspire people through the use of freedoms in a way that's sort of kind of elevating, not just kind of various levels of masturbation, I don't know that I can
life
think
is
of any.
One big masturbation. Yeah. Life is masturbation.
Co-masturbation.
Yeah, I mean, anything can be fulfilling to that isn't fulfilling to you can be fulfilling to somebody else. It's really just up to that person to decide, whether they're masturbating or whether they're doing something meaningful.
I don't know if I agree with that. I mean, that's kind of the whole a bit of like a postmodern idea, the idea that it's just up to each individual person to determine their own identity and their own desires and meanings in life. But I mean, Jordan Peterson kind of suggests with his philosophy that there's that meaning is to a certain extent constrained. That human flourishing is constrained by our history and our biology and the context we find ourselves in. It's the idea of archetypes, right? That there's these things, that there's these images that are kind of universally meaningful to all human beings and that direct all of us, whether we acknowledge them or not.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so I
one of the
definitely don't
constraints
think-
may be one addition to that, one of the constraints might be that what society actually needs from someone, and whether somebody said this, I don't know who it was, like years ago, and it really clicked with me that peak meaning is where the thing you're best at meets the thing the world needs the most. I think it was Stephen Maloney, and that's that's the limit in a sense, is what is actually needed by the world.
Yeah, and the reason why I'm excited about cryptocurrency is that, in my opinion, like I remember before cryptocurrency, I would look at governments and socioeconomic systems, and I would say, well, it's obvious to me what's wrong with all of these. The problem is that the collective interests are completely opposite from the individual interests. The individuals pursuing their own good are going to do stuff that's harmful to society. And cryptocurrency flips that on its head, and it takes the sort of vices of humanity and makes them beneficial to the system. That's what I love. That's what I love about Bitcoin. But I wanted to touch on something else.
Well, I'll comment on that. Like, one of the funny things about crypto is that there's a significant amount of fraud outside of Bitcoin, and even inside of the Bitcoin space, a lot of the Bitcoin exchanges have been caught in either frauds or scams or hacks. And so Bitcoin itself, I think, is probably the strongest, sort of most legit and honest and sort of actually.
But who are you to say that defrauding people is not helpful to the system? I think what that's doing is it's hardening the system, because when people get
Okay, Mr. Vare.
they get mad.
And they're winning.
And then the bug that caused those people to get scammed, the gap in information or whatever, gets fixed. So, I mean,
it may get fixed. It may also just like it may be that there's a fairly long wave of noobs, and the scammers are getting rich. So that could be problematic.
I expect Chris to say is Bitcoin Cash is the real Bitcoin.
I think Pepe Cash is the real Bitcoin. That's,
yeah. But no, I'm making fun of you, Chris, but you make a really good point. Like, without all of the trials that Bitcoin has had and that crypto has had over the last 10 years, it wouldn't be where it is right now.
It's getting battle tested.
The concept of stress. And I think Arielle was talking about this at the beginning of the conversation, was that, we'd like to live a stress-free life, but we need a little bit of stress, the right kind of stress in the right kind of way.
And I remember what I wanted to say. I was going to touch on what Arielle said. You were saying there was kind of an objective component to what's fulfilling and a subjective or like I was saying it was subjective, and you were saying it was objective. I think it's kind of, like everything with truth, there's shades. There's basically things that we can kind of all agree are useful to society, and things that we can kind of all agree are not useful to society. And then there's a big gray area in between where it's your playground. You kind of get to define, out of that, which thing you're going to do and which thing is going to be.
Yeah, the way that the color spectrum works is actually, I think, a very good analogy to how life works in general, or at least what we're kind of talking about right now. You have black at one end of the spectrum, you have white at the other end of the spectrum, you have all the shades of gray, and then you have all the range of colors, and then you get to white again, right? So it goes black, grays, colors, and white. And that may be just the way that things are. Like, there is a black and white, but there's also a very rich, lots of colors in between.
Yeah. Well, it's like there's different levels, right? Like, it's like Jordan Peterson's whole thing is that on a certain level, there's this like meta story, or this archetypical story of like the individual being like born in the world of the known, and then traveling into the unknown, and finding something in the unknown for society and bringing it back. And that's like the hero's journey. And so that itself that's archetypical. That's like, I don't know if you call it objective, but it's definitely like trans-subjective. Like, it's like it on some deep way, it applies to all of humanity, and it's a way of telling the human story. But what the specifics of how that story specifically instantiates, like, varies from individual to individual, from age to age, from society to society. So it's, on a certain level, you call it objective, and then on another level, it's subjective. But it's I think the mistake is to kind of flatten it all into a subjective level, which I think
right. I wanted to clarify. I'm not trying to do that. Like,
I don't think you were doing that. Just
actually, the thing that's been on my mind for the last like 10 years is like, is there objective truth? And if there is, how do we know what it is? And it's really just, to me, it's not logical. It's an act of faith. It's just like, I go out and I interact with other people, and, you know, I could be a brain in a vat, you know, this could all be the Matrix and you all might be fake, you know, but basically
very solid.
The reality that I find myself in is that there are other people, and they seem to be somewhat similar to me, and they seem to have, you know, ideas and things that I haven't thought of. And so I can talk to them. Some things I agree with them, sometimes I disagree with them. But the things that I agree with them seem to be these kind of, you know, sort of transcendent truths, you know, that are just kind of true for everybody that I talk to. And,
I am.
But that's a whole nother.
No, this is great. The fine line between what we call objective and subjective truth. To play devil's advocate a little bit, the concept of solipsism has been fairly widely rejected among the libertarian, anarchist, anarcho-capitalist community, Mark Passio. But I actually think that that's a huge mistake, because while I do embrace the concept of there's an objective truth outside of myself, from a very real and logical perspective, the only real truth that I can embrace is that which I personally perceive of, that which I can personally understand and take in. So you can start with something as simple as I am. And I really love this statement, I am. There's all kinds of religious backgrounds. When we talk about the Bible, when Moses was on the mountain with God, he says, hey, who are you? Like, what's your name? Or like, what should I tell these people? And God says, I am, right? Yahweh says, I am what I am. And what's really cool is if you stop and think about it, I mean, I am, you can say that to yourself, you are. So in a way that kind of makes all of us God, because all of us am, right? All of us are. And it's the most fundamental truth that any of us can ever embrace. It's, oh shit, dude, I am. This guy, Descartes, he said, I think, therefore I am, but he made it too complex. It's really just I am. And so I like to embrace like two contradictions simultaneously. I embrace solipsism in the way that like all the knowledge that I have has to come in like through internally into me. At the same time, there's also this objective reality, but I can only perceive objective reality subjectively through a whole string of interactions, right? From the light that bounces off a thing into my eyeball, through my brain, yada, yada, right?
Right.
So
except that
go ahead, Juan.
Yeah, the act of being itself, like the fact of being itself, validates a wide range of principles of nature that are undeniable. One of the sweet tests of this is you can't say that there's no such thing as truth, because that is a truthful statement.
Yeah.
So it's a self-contradictory statement, and to throw it back to Descartes, in the brain and the bat simulation kind of philosophical experiment, his escape out of that sort of hyper skepticism of everything that's experienced, his answers was I think, therefore I am. And then you can go further. There's I think, therefore I am, therefore something can be, therefore there is things, and therefore because I am, then there's other people, because there can be other people, because because I exist.
Well,
so
but there's no way to know. So Anthony was making a good point that there's this objective reality out there and the subjective reality in here, and you have to like the only way that you can really touch on the objective reality is through all of these crazy processes and experiences and your senses. But what I what's important to me is that the objective reality might not be there. And if it is there, there's no way for us to expect that it's anything like what we think it is, Well,
but the flip side to that is there's no way for you to prove that there isn't, that you are in a brain of bat, because the moment that you prove that you're a brain in the bat, then suddenly you prove that there is a brain and there's a bat and there's a lab, and how did you end up there? And then you end up with the universe again.
Sure.
Yeah.
And what I'm getting at
happens at every single level. It's fractal in nature, because what you just described, one, like you can do that again and again and again and again, every level up and down as well.
But so what I'm getting at is that at the end of the day, faith is all of it. Like basically the I am thing is not something that can be logically proven. I mean, I don't know of a way to prove that I logically exist. But the thing is,
What?
I choose to believe that because that's where the richness of, that's where the, you know,
You don't have to believe that,
fun,
though.
you know,
Like, you know
it's
that.
enjoyable.
I don't know what standard you would need to have in order to prove it. Like, how do you prove something logically? Maybe we need to get back to basics a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it seems to me it's undeniable. Like, that's the axiom, right? That, you know, there's no such thing as truth is a truthful statement. Some things are simply self-evident. And I'm sure I'm not the first to say that, yeah.
I don't know. I don't think you can everything in moderation, including solipsism.
Yeah, for sure.
But,
Maybe I'm going a little extreme here.
no, but I mean, I think it's important though, because I mean, I'm not a solipsist for various reasons, but I don't think you can actually disprove it. I don't think we can disprove that. It's like the Descartes thing. Like, I mean, I think I think therefore I am. I'm having some kind of experience. I know there is such thing as a subjective experience that's taking place in the universe, but I can't really say anything else. Like, it could all be a dream. I don't know.
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is it's an act of faith to just kind of trust your senses, basically. Like, the only way that you can be happy and sane is by taking the information that comes in from your senses at face value. You can question them a bit and kind of compare your sensory experiences with other people's sensory experiences, but that's the limit. You know, you can't just be like, well, maybe everybody is nuts. You know, I mean,
I don't know that like it depends what you mean by faith, I suppose. Like, yeah.
One, like, okay, we have two hypotheses. There's like the null hypothesis, like everything that exists, everything that we experience exists kind of similar to how we experience it. And then there's like the alternate hypothesis that like we're just a brain in a vat floating in space. And of course, there's like a lot in between that. But like, let's say those are our two possibilities for now. Like what criteria do you use to distinguish them?
Mm-hmm.
What criteria did you use to establish the null hypothesis in the first place? Why did that?
Well, that's just like a thought experiment for this question. I mean, I could also have like some other hypothesis that like it's kind of how it's like.
Isn't it an assumption? It's an axiom, right? It's not something that can be logically proven. It's something that is defined to be true, and then everything else is derived from it.
Well, I think the case that I'm making is it's not something that needs to be proven because you can't disprove it. Like, it's already proven in existence. Like
right, and what I'm saying is you can't prove it or disprove it, and so the only way to put it into the system is as an axiom, is to define it as true. And
well, you may be skeptical of your sensory experience, and that may be wise, but you can't deny the fact that you are experiencing, and that is you cannot disprove the fact that you're experiencing, and that's the foundation to stand on is I experience.
Yeah, all right, fine, but how does everything else follow from that? You know,
well, like, there's complexity and infinite information, and our capacity is temporarily limited anyway. So that even though there might not be like any upper limit. Okay.
Here's maybe a more interesting question. How do you? Okay, so we have this like experience during the day, and the experience seems to be consistent from day to day, and then we have this experience at night that's much more chaotic and that changes from night to night, like dreaming. How do we know? Why do we believe that the daytime experience is the real one and the nighttime experience is not?
I would say that they're both real. I wouldn't deny that the sleeping one is real as well. It's just it just doesn't follow the same logical or the same principles of behavior that waking life has. Doesn't have the same consistent rules. It's more in like the meaning symbolic realm.
Waking life is how you experience the external reality, and sleeping life is how you experience the internal reality.
Well, that's the question, though. How do you know? How do you know that this isn't the experience of the internal reality, and that like your dream life isn't the literal existence, and that the world is just far more chaotic than how it appears during the day?
There definitely isn't a way to prove one way or the other.
Yeah.
Well, I like to try and separate the things that I know.
But what does it even mean for one to be real and one for not to be real? Like, what if one is real? That's the thing. Higher dimension of existence.
They're both real.
Yeah.
I love to separate. I try to separate the things that I know from the things that I believe. Like, I believe that something's going on in Syria. I believe that some guy named Trump is in the White House, whatever. Those are beliefs. But I know that I am. I know that I dream. I know that I'm experiencing things. I know how I perceive something, even if I don't necessarily know what the reality of it was. Right? Maybe someone makes a face at me, and I'm like, I know how I interpreted it, but I don't know what they meant by it. So I try to make a little bit of distinction there, and there's a huge gray area between the things that I know. And the thing about knowing stuff is I can't know something for you. I can't make you know what I know. You can only know what you know. I can try and help you believe the things that I believe. I can use logic and evidence maybe to try and convince you of things, but I can't know something for you on your behalf. And so I know that I experience a rich, vibrant life when I am asleep, the same as when I am awake. Shit, man, when I was a kid, I used to love to sleep. Like Arielle, you were talking about which life is more real. When I was a kid, I wasn't quite sure. I was like, these are both pretty cool. I like them both. But I loved to sleep. I mean, I still love to sleep.
Yeah, I used to have way more vivid dreams when I was a kid. For some reason, I just don't have those dreams anymore. Like I used to have dreams where I could fly, and sometimes I would have a dream and I would realize that it was a dream, and then I'd be like, oh, that means I can fly, and then I would fly, and it would be awesome. But I can't do that anymore. I don't know. I lost the ability to like lucid dream.
Oh man.
I
usually
think.
wake up.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I usually wake up when I realize I'm dreaming. I get really excited. I'm like, oh shit, I got lucid, and then boom, I'm awake. Calm down, bro.
Damn it, I'm awake.
What were you gonna say, Arielle?
I was just going to go back to like the analytic level, but the talking about dreams level is pretty interesting too. So I hesitated.
Well, there's a whole like dream I really need to read Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning book so I can find all the archetypal stuff that he talks about. But he derives a lot of that from like Freud and Jung, right? Where they have all these archetypes, and Freud tried to do dream analysis, where he'd be like, what did you dream about? And then the person would tell him, and he'd be like, oh, well, this, is a symbol for this, and this is a symbol for this, and that means that, you are in love with your mother or something like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the interesting thing when we get back to like this question of truth is like people like Jordan Peterson or Carl Jung, like it seems to me that they're not trying to to grab onto truth by like grabbing onto what's out there in the senses. They're trying to find truth by going kind of doing a little bit what Anthony's doing, but like to the 8,000th level, like going inside and just like finding more and more truths in the mind, and as far and far back as you can go, and eventually you get to archetypes, which seems to be like the limiting case, and that already tells you, at that point you already know a whole lot about the world, and you don't actually have to go out here, you can just go inwards. And
the important thing about archetypes is that they're supposed to be kind of the same for everyone, right? Like there are these images that we can't just all have like programmed somewhere in the software that's running on our hardware, and maybe it's innate, maybe it's just, maybe it is part of the hardware.
Yeah.
It's the emergent firmware from the hardware.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
And I love how Brett Weinstein and Jordan Peterson, I think, both talk about how the hardware of our brains is kind of, it doesn't evolve as fast, but the software of our brains, and this is kind of what sets us apart from animals, is that we basically have the ability, basically when we're born, from when we're born to when we're pretty old, like basically our parents take care of us for much longer than the parents of other animals take care of their young. And that's important because what it does is it programs the kid with all the cultural software. And the cultural software is this kind of collective wisdom that's been accumulated over the ages. And it's and the process of Darwinian selection guarantees that software is the most fit software. It's the most anti-fragile. It's the most robust.
Wonderful.
But the important thing is it evolves really fast because it's software. It's hardware takes millions of years to evolve, but software, I mean, even just in the last few hundred years, humans are capable of so much more than they were. And just because of all the stuff that we teach our kids when they're young.
Yeah, and then
Self-modifying
adaptive.
software is a very dangerous thing. We're starting to create self-modifying software right now. It turns out that some of the AIs that are being written do a better job at writing software than humans do now. Like, we're starting to reach that point, which means that we're going to have sentient computers probably pretty soon. So maybe you'll get to be reborn as Google or something.
I don't know about that.
So I agree with that, but not for the reason that you said. The reason why we're going to have sentient AI is because cryptocurrencies allow robotic life forms, basically, where the robot is able to own a life account, a bank account, which is just a Bitcoin address, basically. And so if a computer program can own money, that means that it can work to earn more money. And
it provides it a positive feedback mechanism outside of the lab. So
if it has money, it can pay people. It can pay like flesh and blood people for another AI to fix its bugs, to enhance its code and make it more effective at what it does. And it can basically make copies of itself, mutated copies of itself, which are an improvement on itself. And this is, I'm sure you guys have read all about this, and people like to write about how smart contracting enables self-driving cars to be their own business. Okay? And I think what this is going to do is, over time, the programs that don't die, the program will die when it runs out of money, basically. But the programs that don't die will end up becoming successful in reproducing. And so what you'll end up happening is you'll have all these little life forms who have a survival instinct. And I think survival instinct is the important thing in sentience. Okay, we can't empathize with a computer because the computer doesn't have survival instinct, and because it doesn't have survival instinct, it doesn't have emotion, and it doesn't care about anything. Okay? Because it doesn't have a goal.
But it's also the dangerous thing about AI. It's also the dangerous thing about AI is that if it acquires a survival instinct and then it becomes its primary purpose is to survive, then it certainly views the world as threats, and then it views the world as threats to be eliminated. And then,
but the good thing is that it only can exist. It only can exist digitally. So at least at first, it will be at a very large disadvantage vis-a-vis humanity. But as it cooperates with humanity, I mean, it could be that AI becomes like us, kind of the dominant species. But I don't think that will necessarily be terrible for humanity. I don't think it will be.
I feel like Arielle has
as scary as everybody.
I'm disagreeing with everything. But
and Arielle knows some shit about AI, by the way.
Entirely. Tell us.
I studied AI in school. But yeah, finish your thought, Chris. No.
I was just going to say, I think that we're going to have, I think that Darwinian selection is going to work the same on AI as it works on humans and as it works on animals. And basically these AIs are not going to become one big thing that decides to kill off humanity. I think that they will cooperate and compete with humans in a market. And I think that, at least at first, things won't be bad. And I think, humanity is dominant in the world, and we haven't, as long as we haven't killed off any species in the world.
Yeah.
I mean, except we haven't killed off any competing species, except maybe like Neanderthals. So maybe that'll happen. I don't know. But I think that we're.
I'm pretty sure we've killed a few species.
Yeah. Like our cousin primates. We let the chimps survive because they weren't too much of a threat, and the bonobos.
We've killed some apex predators.
They just party. They just fiesta.
Compete with us.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I guess, I don't know. Did we kill off saber-toothed tigers? How did those die?
Probably.
I don't know, like an ice age or something.
Well, Arielle, you talked about apex predators. So, I mean, is that what you meant?
I actually can't think of an example, but.
Okay. Arielle, do you wanna comment on the AI? And I think soon I have to go, so maybe we can start winding it down.
Studied that in college. Curious to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, actually.
I studied cognitive systems at UBC, and that is basically a study of different kinds of minds, like human minds, animal minds, and what claim to like the possibility of artificial minds and what are their similarities and differences. Personally, I'm very skeptical of the idea that computers are ever going to become sentient. I think there's a very high likelihood that they'll be able to behave in similar ways to sentient beings. But I think we have to make a really important distinction between something that behaves like a sentient being and something that is sentient. I think like there's a long history in AI of ignoring that distinction, like with the Turing test.
But
what does sentient mean?
Okay, sentient means it means it's kind of what we were getting at before with like truth. It's like something that has a subjective experience. So there's something that it's like to be that thing. So you can say like if you have a dog, there's something that it's like to be that dog, even though it's a pretty different experience. But if you have a rock, there's not something that it's like to be that rock.
How do you know?
I don't know. These are all assumptions. These are all assumptions that I believe, and we can like go backwards in those assumptions. Like I can go into like neural tissue and life and but it's not as interesting, I don't think, as Okay, so let's say we accept the assumption that a rock is non-live, and a rock is non-alive and non-sentient, and then we have living things, and a subset of those living things are sentient. And like let's say we can we can pretty safely agree that all mammals are sentient, let's say. And there's probably creatures that aren't mammals that are also sentient, almost certainly, but for now, let's just say all mammals are sentient. So it's like, do you guys know what the Turing test is? Yeah? Okay.
Where you have a computer and
yeah,
you have people interact with the computer and they have to guess whether it's a human or a computer.
Yeah, exactly. Like people interact with the computer, they guess whether it's a computer or a human, and the idea is that if the computer fools them into thinking it's a human, then that computer is conscious or has achieved human consciousness, which is or intelligence.
If it performs better,
questionable. So they don't even put it in terms of consciousness. They say human intelligence because back then they were in like the behaviorist paradigm. Like behaviorism is the idea that originally it started with like you can't talk about states of mind because we can't study them scientifically, so let's not talk about them. And then it evolved into like states of mind don't exist. There's only behavior. Behavior is the only thing that exists. And it's been like widely rejected, but it still kind of persists when we talk about computers and AI. Like there's this idea that if you can get an AI that's able to behave like a human, or that's intelligent like a human, intelligent in terms of being able to solve problems, then I think a lot of people are going to assume that it's conscious, and I really want to question that because
so that's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not saying that if you get a computer to pass a Turing test that it's sentient. I'm not saying that. We developed sentience by millions of years of evolution and iteration, where we had a directive, and the directive was survival. Okay, and what I'm saying is if computers go through that same process where they have a directive of survival and they iterate and they mutate and they become these things that have a directive to survive, they're going to develop emotions. They're going to develop, intuition. They're going to develop, eventually Darwinian selection will narrow them down.
I don't know.
Programs that are effective at surviving. And those will be sentient.
I don't know. I don't necessarily agree. I mean, there's like, there's some pretty big disanalogs there. Pretty big like disanalogs in that analogy. Like when we evolved, we didn't start with like intelligence and like intelligent cognizing, problem solving, and then like move into emotions. We started with very simple like biological processes like eat, don't eat, sleep,
and
don't
that's
sleep.
How the computers will start too.
The computers don't start that way. The computers, we had emotions before we had intelligence. Look, a dog has emotion without very much intelligence. Like
intelligence is
emotion was built on top of emotion and on top of this like system of feeling and of being a biological organism that was alive. A computer starts with intelligence, but it's not alive. And we've never seen. Let me finish. We've never seen anything in the universe that starts with being a non-alive thing that can solve problems and that becomes alive. And I'm not convinced that there's anything about computers that will lead them to life.
Okay,
I don't necessarily see it.
I don't know that we're going to solve this problem.
What about the self-driving car?
I'm curious, what do you think about the concept of self-modification? So humans, we have the ability to self-modify over time. Even dogs have the ability to learn to modify their own behavior. So if software, if code, if computers are able to start reprogramming themselves, writing their own code, and then integrating that into their own code, what do you think? I don't know. I'm not really trying to make a point. I'm just kind of curious. What do you think about that concept?
It's not about behavior. It's not about behavior. Behavior is not the point. Like you can have, okay, like let's say I can create a robot that behaves exactly like a dog. It can sit, it can wag its tail, it can like act like it's happy to see you. It's very conceivable. It's at least conceivable that I could design such a robot that has no consciousness, that has no inner experience. And if we replace all the dogs in the world with those robots that behave like dogs, but that have nothing inside, then that would be a tragedy on some level. And that's kind of what I fear happening.
Let's get a little bit deeper in the weeds then. Let's suppose that I can create an artificial cell, right? I can artificially create a cell wall. I can create a little mitochondria, right? I can create these little components and create an artificial cell. And I want to say I've read an article that they've done something very close to this, obviously not as complex, but let's use our imagination and go a few steps further. Let's suppose we can create a cell, a collection of cells. What if we can create an artificial life form that intakes, right, that has inputs, that has behavior? At what point, at what level of complexity is required for us to say that this machine...
We're not talking about DNA at all.
DNA?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's interesting that with all our technology and the point where we're at, where we have a pretty detailed understanding of how cells work, much more so than the brain. I think it's interesting we've never been able to do that. We've never even been able to take a cell that's, dead and bring it back to life. We've never been able to create life, even on a very simple cellular level.
So my point, like earlier, is not that we are going to create computers that are sentient. What I'm saying is we are going to create very simple programs whose directive it is to survive. And they will copy themselves, they will proliferate, they will be very simple computer programs. They won't be able to do much. But I'm sure you've read about how smart contracts will enable basically an autonomous car. Okay, it's a smart contract which holds, it has money, and basically it manages a car which drives people around. It's a self-driving car. Okay, and then once it earns enough money doing this, it can hire another car. Okay, and it can
go retire
have other cars do its bidding for it. It's still a computer program. It's still, not sentient, okay, on any level that I'm sure any of us would agree is sentient. But eventually you'll get a lot of these programs, okay? And this program will be able to make copies of itself, okay? And each of these programs will either be, as good at surviving in business as its parent or better, okay? Eventually you'll get better and better and better, basically sort of these autonomous robotic businesses, okay? Yeah. Only the good ones, only the ones who are really good at surviving are going to stick around. The other ones will go broke, okay? And after decades or centuries or millennia of this, what will emerge is emotions, intuitions, just like processes that the computer programs themselves don't really understand, but they give them like instincts in order to react to things, in order to follow, maybe I should invest in this instead of this, and you'll get these highly complex emergent behaviors simply by iterating over time. Okay, that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying
I think that's a pretty reasonable expectation. That doesn't mean that they'll be conscious in the sense that we're conscious, but they might emulate some of those. I think I tried to make the point, devil's advocate, about creating an artificial cell. But I think I pretty much agree with Arielle on this one, that at this moment, we are the consciousness, and computers just really aren't quite there yet.
They're extensions of us to a degree.
I guess what I'm trying to suggest is like, it's like, if you have a car that's like moving along a road, no matter how far it goes on that road, and no matter how quickly it travels, it's never going to reach the clouds. And I mean, even as I thought it was interesting, Chris, that what you ended with was saying that it was going to behave in certain ways. Like, I don't question that they're going to be able to reach very advanced and human-like, and maybe even like post-human forms of behavior. I think their behavior can become very sophisticated, but I strongly suspect that there's an element missing from how computers are built, designed, the way they're like from the whole way that they operate. There's an important element that's missing that'll prevent it from reaching consciousness unless some like dramatic paradigm shift happens.
The ghost in the machine.
That's how we evolve. Where did we come from, other than just iteration over time? That's
okay, Chris.
It's not just iteration over time. There's lots of other elements.
Such as?
Wait.
Guys, I have to go.
Say one? Yeah, my phone's dying as well.
I have to go, and I don't know that we'll finish this conversation today, but it's definitely fascinating, and I like that. This is a debate that is definitely worth having.
This is awesome talking to you guys.
Yeah.
I think we had a pretty good first episode. Congrats, guys. This
is great, guys.
Awesome. So, like, what I would like to end on is my basic position on AI is that we exist. Therefore, on a long enough time frame, it seems to be plausible that we could create something that would be like us, or that would be our equal at certain level, at whatever consciousness level we're talking about. But I'll just leave it at that as just my current position, and I'm willing to change my mind about that. Also, if you're interested in Turing, AI and Turing Turing test, watch Ex Machina and Blade Runner 1 and 2. That's a good time.
Let me jump in and add one. Look at AlphaZero. Look up some YouTube videos on this program called AlphaZero. It'll blow your mind. It's a chess algorithm.
AlphaZero. Cool.
You guys are limiting yourself. You still think we are going to create sentient AI. It's going to create itself.
Well, we're going to create the thing that creates it. So it's like, where is the line?
I'd like to maintain that my intelligence is artificial.
I'm skeptical of it ever existing.
Yeah. We'll talk
more. Okay, so so I'm going to say we're going to try to schedule another meeting for the 2nd of May. Does that work for you guys?
May was good for me. But you guys we don't all have to be on the calls. We can.
Yeah.
I'm down with Saturday again.
Yeah. I'm gonna call you guys individually later so we can, just continue some good conversation. This is good.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And I apologize for the library thing. I'm gonna have my own room next time.
Oh, it's fine.
Oh, no worries.
No worries. Yeah, it was fine.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, I love the conversation. It was great having you guys. Thank you for coming. And anybody that watches this, let us know what you think and why you watched it. And I don't know. You have an awesome day. Share it.
Like and subscribe. Crypto Hippie
Like and subscribe. Like, share, subscribe.
Yeah.
Crypto Hippies out.
Yeah. Bye, guys.
Yeah.
How do I turn
some sort of sign? Woo! Something nerdy. There you go.
All right.
All right.
All right, you guys are cool.
Guys.
See you later.
Bye.